Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our Data Values Community meeting today. We're so excited to have you participate, engage, and add your voice and experiences to this insightful and action-oriented conversation we're going to be having. My name is Yazid Salahuddin Mikhail, joining this call from Nigeria. I'm a data scientist and a data value advocate. I work with communities, grassroots communities, and policymakers to help them in making informed data-driven decisions and to also shape how people's data is collected, governed. I'll be co-moderating this session with my colleague, Daniel, today. Daniel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. My name is Daniel Carranza, as Yazid said, and I'm part of Data Uruguay, an organization working with open data, civic tech, and open government for the last 10 years. This year in particular, I'm very happy to be part of the Data Value Advocates cohort. And together with Yazid, we will be moderating this whole session. So time and time again, we continue to see the role that data plays in digital transformation, from medical dashboards to cash transfers to artificial intelligence and climate technologies. The production, management, and use of data play a critical part in building an open, safe, and fair digital future. However, many data practices around the world continue to exacerbate unequal power dynamics, exploit personal data for profit or political gain, and reinforce structural inequalities. In a world based on data, unsystematized information just disappears. Whole cultures, languages, knowledge, country identities in whole just can disappear. And this invisibilization or subrepresentations through incomplete or bad quality data damages those who are most vulnerable. It damages people who are from different countries, from different ethnicities, religions, and we can't allow that to happen and just erase them from basically history. Because if we can't exist in data, we have less opportunities, worse quality of life, and ultimately we're being left out of the story. This needs to be disrupted, and an opportunity to do so lies within the UN Secretary General's call for a global digital compact. The compact is expected to outline shared principles for an open, free, and secure digital future for all. A collaborative and open consultative process is underway so that everyone, everywhere can shape the principles and actions for the global digital compact. And today, we are here to talk about how data values and fair and equitable data practices can and should be placed at the heart of the UN Global Digital Compact, and more broadly, how we can create a digital future that is fair, open, and safe for all. We'll hear more about the Global Digital Compact from the UN's Secretary General's Envoy on Technology very shortly. Today, Data Values Community Session will be one of many over the year, which are intended to explore topics and issues related to data values and how the manifesto ensures that data does not harm or exclude, but rather empowers. We continue to encourage you all to join us, engage, or even reach out to co-host an upcoming community meeting if you'd like. Before we share what is on the agenda, for today, we want to begin with understanding where you all are on some key issues around data and digital transformation. Please log on to the Slido using the image on the screen, the QR code, or by clicking on the link in the chat. You can then complete these questions.
Thank you so much, Daniel. While everyone takes a few moments to complete those questions, I want to share more about today's agenda and a few housekeeping items. We have an exciting agenda packed with engaging discussion and speakers. First, we'll begin with a short discussion with the UN Secretary General Envoy on Technology and the Director of the Ada Lovelace Institute on the importance and purpose of creating a global digital compact and how data values fit within this agenda. Then we'll go into breakout rooms where we would like to hear from all of you on what shared principle should be included, what issues need to be addressed, and what commitment should be made through the Global Digital Compact. We will then come back together towards the end and share some ideas and insights from each group. The insights you shared through this meeting will be captured in a shared Google document. A summarized version of everyone's insight will be submitted to the open consultation as the product of a data values community input. We'll also encourage you all to I will also encourage you all on this call today to consider submitting your own or organization input to the consultation for the Global Digital Compact. Adding your voice and raising ideas about the topics you care about strengthens and support our collective contribution and provide wider range of inputs to be included. Finally, we'll share a few upcoming data values campaign and updates and engagement opportunities. We really look forward to having an interactive discussion and hearing from all of you about your ideas, experiences, concerns, insight. Please add any comment or question in the chat box at any time, and please be ready to share and listen in the breakout rooms. You can also engage on social media using the hashtag data values. Quickly, some logistical details before we begin this session. Before we get into a few poll responses, I know Fadumo has already pasted a link for poll. If you haven't done that, please fill it. Before we go into some responses, I have some housekeeping items to briefly talk about. This session will be recorded and shared online. A live transcript is available for this session. You should see the bottom on your screen now if you would like to turn this on. International sign interpretation and French and Spanish interpretation is also available. Please make sure that if you speak a little more slowly to help everyone follow your comments. As we have a lot of people with us today and we're excited about that, we would like you to share your experience in a very short and a sweet way. Please use the chat to communicate and share your ideas and questions where necessary. All right, let's go into the poll. Let's see what people have said regarding the poll. Oh, fantastic. It's exciting to see the people's energy level today, a sign that we're going to be having a really fantastic conversation. Amazing. What does a fairer digital future looks like to you? Inclusiveness. I can say the word inclusive. Inclusive has been the most written word, as if everybody knows the word to use. Thank you so much for making that contribution. Then the last question, I suppose, Fadumo. Amazing. It's good to see that everyone on this call today support all the 5 agendas to be centered in the digital compact. And just a quick note before I pass on to Daniel, a fairer digital future from all I have seen people make mention of is where information technology and opportunity is accessible for everyone and equal opportunities that keeps maybe security, privacy, and ethical use of data and empowers individuals to make informed decisions about their online presence and interaction. Thank you so much for answering the poll and making that wonderful contribution. Daniel?
Thank you, Yazid, and everyone for responding to the poll. I'm so honored to introduce these great speakers to you all. We have with us today Jenna Slottin, who is the Senior Director of Policy at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Carly Kind, who is the Director of the Ada Lovelace Institute, and finally, Amandeep Singh Gill, who is the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. Jenna, over to you to kick off the conversation.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and to you, Yazid. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you to everyone who joined us today for the discussion. I'm the Senior Director of Policy for the Global Partnership, and I'm delighted to moderate a discussion between Amandeep Singh Gill and Carly Kind to sort of get us warmed up and get us thinking a little bit about the opportunity of the UN Global Compact and what issues we might want to be thinking about before we sort of move into the breakout rooms and have the opportunity to hear from all of you for the consultation and the input. I'll remind everyone to please keep themselves on mute. Thank you very much. And so, as Daniel, I think, said really well right at the outset, this community, the Data Values community and the Data Values campaign, are really centered around promoting a fair data future. Why is that so important to the Global Compact and the forthcoming Summit of the Future that the UN Secretary General has called for? And that's because digital transformation is so important and so significant for accelerating progress on the SDGs and helping expand opportunity for all people. But it also comes with many risks. And I think we all know in this on this Zoom line that all these great new digital tools and digital systems, they run on data. And data is sort of the lifeblood of all these systems. And that's what enables the tools to really transform lives by connecting across different sources, by generating new insights, and by enabling people to have access to services and opportunities, whether that's financial or in health or education or otherwise. So for too long, it feels that discussions around data and discussions around digital systems have been unnecessarily separated. But it's so essential to be thinking about the processes by which data is collected, produced, analyzed, and governed, and how that affects people and what that means in terms of their possibility to participate in the digital economy, and whether our digital future is one that promotes more equitable outcomes or one that reinforces structural inequalities or limits people's access to those opportunities. And that's why the Data Values Manifesto really emphasizes inclusion and participation, as so many of you did in the initial Slido poll, and why it emphasizes accountability in data production, sharing, and use, and encourages the democratization of data skills and advocates for greater investment in open and responsive data systems. So that, for us and for this community, is the relationship between these questions around data and broader questions around digital transformation. The Global Digital Compact is such an exciting opportunity, having been called for by the Secretary General in his common agenda, and creates a really much needed avenue for agreeing global norms and guardrails within which all stakeholders can work toward a more equitable digital future. And the process for developing that compact is so exciting because of the open consultation period that we're in, and the approach taken by the UN Tech Envoy's office to engage all stakeholders and to hear everyone's views. And that's really what we're here for today. We chose to focus our consultation, while the Digital Compact consultation focuses on 7 issues, we chose to zero in on 3 that relate most closely to that interrelationship between digital and data. Those are protect data, apply human rights online, and promote the regulation of artificial intelligence. So those are the 3 that we'll focus in on today. And with that, I'm very happy to now turn it over to have a discussion with our 2 speakers, Amandeep Gill Singh, the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, and Carly Kind, the Director of the Ada Lovelace Institute. So we'll start by posing a question to Amandeep. For those who may not be familiar, what is the Global Digital Compact? What are its aims? And why is this compact needed now more than ever? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jenna. It's a pleasure to be with this group today, and thank you to the Global Partnership and the Data Values Campaign for the invitation. So what's a Global Digital Compact? It's one of the outcomes that the Secretary General called for at the Summit of the Future in September 2024. It's one of the 11 to 12 very important issues that are on the international agenda today, alongside the agenda for peace, how to regulate the space environment and other global commons, how to make more decisive progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, how to prevent the planet from tipping over because of climate change, etc. So digital is now on the international agenda squarely in the context of this leaders level summit. The other thing I like to say about what it is that compacts are an interesting way to address policy challenges. The traditional UN way is to either have resolutions and declarations or to have treaties. And treaties take time, and consensus building on treaties these days is very difficult. So a compact offers us a practical but still substantial way on fast-moving issues to bring the international community together, to refresh our thinking on norms, to build a larger tent for more diverse stakeholders to participate in the policy discussion, and to come up with a shared framework for actions. So it's not only about principles, but it's about going beyond principles through concrete actions. Now, why is it needed today? I mean, this community knows the importance of digital issues, how we have shifted irreversibly from an ICTs paradigm to a data and AI paradigm since the early part of the 21st century. Data is playing a larger role today. Digital technologies, digital platforms are having an impact all across the pillars of the UN: peace and security, human rights and development. And it's very important for us in a fragmented world to get a collective vision of what our digital future looks like, should look like, and how do we get there. So this is why this conversation is very important. It's also very timely. If you look at President Biden's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, he laid out these concerns that the Secretary General has been speaking about for a while: protection of data, particularly of vulnerable groups like children, bringing a fairer competitive field into practice where smaller companies, entrepreneurs, startups can also compete with big tech, and above all, aligning the digital age with our shared human values. So that's why this is very important. Just to finish, the process that you mentioned, that's just kicked off. And this process is multi-stakeholder. So governments alone are not going to come up with the answers. All of you, civil society, academia, the private sector, the tech community needs to participate, make its voice heard. And this process is going to take some time. It's going to last about 18 months. There is a 6 to 9 month consultation, research, reaching out, listening intently phase, after which the governments will start to negotiate what goes into the Global Digital Compact. How does it look like? How do we land those principles, those action points in the practice of governments and the private sector? So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you now, Carly. So as a data values partner that works in the data governance space, what principles should all governments, companies, civil society, and other stakeholders adhere to ensure a fair digital future? And in what ways do you think a global mechanism like the Global Digital Compact can help make those principles a reality?
Thanks so much, Jenna. And really, really honored to be here. As Jenna said, I'm representing the Ada Lovelace Institute. For those of you who don't know us, we're a London-based independent research institute with a remit to ensure that data and AI work for people and society. So our mission and vision is very much aligned with the data values community. I really appreciated what Amandeep said about the opportunity to show policy leadership through the Global Compact. I completely agree that not only is a Global Compact a really fitting mechanism to do that, given the challenges of building consensus that would need to underscore a treaty in the current ecosystem, but also because there has been an absence of policy leadership in many circles to date in this field. And the current ecosystem is very much defined by what has been technologically possible or pursued, rather than some type of policy vision about what is desirable, inclusive, equitable for when it comes to the data ecosystem. So it's exciting, really exciting to see the UN moving into this space. At the Ada Lovelace Institute, we've also spent the last few years thinking about what is a positive vision for the data ecosystem that does that does create a kind of equitable, inclusive ecosystem that derives benefits for individuals, but also protects human rights. And if you look at the current data economy, data ecosystem, the thing that really, really needs to be addressed at the center is the question of power. And I think this is central to the Data Values Manifesto. Where does power lie in the current data economy? It doesn't lie with people. It lies very much with a certain set of companies, for the most part, corporations, consolidated power in platforms and other places. It rarely lies with governments either, although that obviously differs across the world. And so looking at the current ecosystem, one of the big underlying issues we need to address is how power can be more fairly and equitably distributed, power over data ecosystems, and the ability to use data to derive social benefit. We've just finished a research project which culminated in a project called Rethinking Data, a report called Rethinking Data. We worked with a working group of experts on that. And we identified kind of 4 interventions, 4 areas for change. So to address your question, Jenna, about what the main kind of principles should be that should shape this work to overhaul the data ecosystem. So we feel that in order to address this question of power, you need to look at 4 different areas for change. One is around infrastructure. So transforming infrastructure into open and interoperable ecosystems, translating into principles of openness, transparency, and individual agency over data. The second is around governance. So key, as is implicit in what I just said, is reclaiming control of data from dominant companies, translating into principles of public scrutiny, accountability, and redress over data and algorithms and AI systems in order to serve the public benefit. A third area for intervention is institutions. How do we rebalance the centers of power away from the existing institutions towards new non-commercial institutions that kind of disrupt this process of exploitative data practices in particular? This translates into creating a more equal footing for how we channel data and what purposes we use it for. And finally, and this really underscores the Data Value Manifesto, is democratic participation. Ensuring public participation is a really essential part of technology policymaking. A lot of the work we do at the Ada Lovelace Institute is consulting with publics about what they want from technology policy. We really believe in these principles of representation, co-design, in order to create legitimacy over how data is used and governed. So I think that's how I'd sum up how we see the current situation and where we think the points of intervention are. And I think they align really, really well with the data values approach and more broadly, the approach that's being pursued under the auspices of the Compact.
Thanks so much, Carly. I'll come back to Amandeep now with another question. I wonder if you can give us a little bit more background on why the Compact will focus on the 7 key digital issues that are outlined for the consultation. And what does your office hope to gain by running the open consultation? What are you hoping to see?
Yes, thank you, Jenna. And I just wanted to, before I answer your question, say that the Ada Lovelace Institute report on data and rebalancing digital power is a must read. You know, I keep it in my data folder along with another report that I read recently on data justice by IT for Change. So this is a significant contribution to our current debate on data issues. Now, these 7 issues were mentioned by the Secretary General in his Our Common Agenda report. And in some extent, they are obvious. You know, if you ask anyone who's interested in these issues concerned by the developments, would end up listing those. The issue of connectivity, addressing the digital divide, the issue of preventing internet fragmentation, because this global public good has allowed us to be in touch with each other, allowed human rights campaigners to make their voice heard. I mean, there is the downside, but there is a global consciousness that has developed thanks to this one internet. It's important to preserve this as a global public good. Then there is the issue of human rights online. Human rights offline are human rights online. There should be no distinction, no carve out for the digital space. But how do we go beyond just saying human rights apply to add to the accountability side of the equation, accountability not just of governments, but also the private platforms. So there is, we have a twin problem here. And then obviously issues around misinformation, disinformation, violent content, the cybersecurity problem, the digital trust and security problem, the issue of data. And the Secretary General has put it in this way. There is the issue of protection, which you mentioned as one of the 3 issues we would look at. But he has also added this very significant nuance about giving people options about their data. And I think what we mean by that is the data empowerment paradigm, which Carly referred to. Who does data belong to? And do we have choices of over our own data? The human rights paradigm is now supplemented by this concern about human agency. In the age of data and AI, we need to have agency. Our agency has been leaking away to digital devices and algorithms over a period of time. It's almost as if we don't realize it. We are step by step losing our, in a sense, centrality to this, this important technology. So we need to recover that. That's the nuance there. Then, of course, AI. Regulation, maybe some people think that'll stifle innovation, but certainly we need to align AI governance practices across the globe, align them with our human values, so that we don't have fragmentation, we don't have forum shopping. The recent crypto scandal has shown you that these companies, some of these platforms, business models can escape the regulatory net by going offshore. So we need to make sure that there is some alignment. And now what we want to achieve from this process is we are at an initial phase where the co-facilitators, Sweden and Rwanda, are listening to different stakeholders about the process, about the general aspects of the compact, but also what kind of issues are important. So these 7 issues were mentioned by the Secretary General, and there is, I would say, an 8th issue, which is how to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. So beyond these, what else is important? Do we need some more thematic deep dives? Because from next week onward, we would start planning those thematic deep dives to bring the nuance of all these rapidly evolving areas of policy into New York. So that's where we are in terms of these themes. I just want to end by saying something about data. For me, that's really the heart of the piece. In my previous work at the International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative, where the goal was democratizing the data and AI opportunity, making it more inclusive, making it more diverse, because diversity addresses risks. And diversity is not just the morally right thing to do, but it's the practical thing to do if we want to get anywhere with data. Today, we think there's loads of data, but there is still a lot of work to be done on interoperability, on building gold standard data sets in key areas of SDGs, health, education, the green transition, humanitarian emergencies, and so on. So that work is not of that much interest to the private sector. There's no quick money to be made there, this 18-month horizon that private companies have. So there's a role for the public sector nationally and internationally to have these smart coalitions that help us move towards data commons. And in the SG's list of issues, digital commons are mentioned. What are these commons? I mean, we know them from the pastures, the water sources, the rivers that our ancestors have wisely used, so that, one person or a group doesn't kind of hang on to all that's there and overexploit. But these are well regulated, they're not messed up, but they're also open, because otherwise they are clubs, they are not commons. So everyone should be able to benefit. And we really need to work actively to achieve these digital commons, particularly data and AI commons. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll come back to you now, Carly, and we have some questions coming up in the chat, but I'll just pose a question to you about the consultation. So coming from your perspective and the work that you do, why do you think it's so critical that everyone's thoughts, experiences, and input are considered in developing the compact? And how do you see data values fitting in with the agenda, especially as it was just outlined by Amandeep? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things at a high level and maybe one specific example. Again, I think a historical problem in this area has been the kind of lack of legitimacy of those who are making the decisions about how data is governed and new technologies are rolled out. And I think in order to build legitimacy, building on the will of the people, as it were, is a really critical route to a more legitimate data ecosystem that has everybody's buy-in. Moreover, I mean, we've heard lots of talk in recent years about ethics and the ethics of technology, the ethics of AI. But again, I think this question of whose ethics really does necessitate a proper engagement with people about values, what are shared values in this space. And in order to kind of define the ethical boundaries of some of these questions, human rights gives us the starting point, of course, as always, and the kind of critical foundations on which more granular kind of ethical judgments or questions of values can be built. But there is still a lot that can be gained, I think, from dialogue and public input in order to really understand the guardrails here. A good example, I think, is the recent release of ChatGPT, which will not have escaped anybody's notice, of course, because it is truly a kind of watershed moment in conversations around new technologies, I think. It's kind of pierced the veil of public interest and knowledge, unlike previous forms of AI that have come before it. And, you know, this is an exciting, potentially disruptive, potentially problematic new technology. It's fundamentally unlike things we've seen before in many respects. And it was just kind of opened up to people without much thought being given, it could be argued, or at least the thought that was given was very much by reference to a certain set of technologists in Silicon Valley who were thinking about a set of values and ethics that they would like to consider, but did not gain the input from the rest of the world who are also affected by its release. And as a result, we're seeing really fundamental questions come up about the education sector or other areas that are very much dismantled a little bit by the release of this technology. So surely that kind of fundamental societally changing intervention would benefit from the consideration of a more inclusive and diverse set of opinions about what is the right way for this type of technology to be released and to be governed. And if the equation is innovation on the one hand and regulation on the other, which Amandeep kind of referred to that accepted wisdom, although I think we probably could all question it, where do publics want new technologies to fall on that spectrum, and who should make those decisions? So I think it's really, really important that we start to build much more diverse and inclusive set of thinking about what are the guardrails and what are the boundaries of these types of technologies, as well as what are their potentials. And the only way we can do that with any actual legitimacy, I think, is to have a much broader public conversation in which people are invited to give their perspectives globally as well, so that we kind of disrupt the current kind of value chain where things come out of, prominently Silicon Valley, other places too as well, but of course, historically prominently that place, and then are adopted by the rest of the world. So we'd like to see a much more genuine conversation and a global one as well.
Great, thank you, Carly. So now I'm going to look at go to the questions in the chat. We have a few more minutes, and I'll sort of try to direct them to each of you, Carly and Amandeep, and give you an opportunity to sort of come back. We have a question that was asked about some recent discussions at the Internet Governance Forum, particularly youth engagement, highlighting questions around quantum computing and encryption, as well as IoT and related cybersecurity challenges. And the person asking the question highlighted best practices that have been undertaken with respect to transparency, fair labeling, open understanding of how those tools are regulated. My understanding of the question is, how can the global community pick up on best practices from those areas and make them more widespread? So, and Amandeep, we'll put that question to you, and if you can hold on to that question for a second. We have another question about where digital tools, apps, or internet-based tools are developed in countries or in environments where regulation is less developed, and how to ensure sort of safety and personal and data agency and protecting human rights when national level legislation is underdeveloped. So what to do in those scenarios, and how can global processes help address those? And also a question related to what can be done globally on misinformation online. So we'll put that question to you, Carly. Amandeep, a second question for you to consider is the tension inherent in making best use of data for vulnerable or marginalized groups. And the person asking the question from GIPS was asking specifically about displaced persons and refugees, while ensuring that they are protected and that their rights are protected. So that's a real challenge in terms of sharing and making data accessible, but also protecting people. And then lastly, for you, Carly, a second question about digital public infrastructure and how digital public infrastructure can be effectively harnessed to manage data at national level, especially within sectors like agriculture. So we can get the best use of digital public infrastructure or maximize the potential while protecting, ensuring that people are empowered and they are protected. So we'll go to you, Amandeep, first, and then to Carly to try to respond to those questions. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So on this question of these emerging technologies, quantum, the Internet of Things, the metaverse, the intelligent networks of tomorrow. And I think Carly's example, the reference to ChatGPT and what's coming after that, there's Claude on the way, which may have some impressive capabilities from what I understand. So there is a need for kind of horizon scanning, because as we deal with the problems from the business models and tech platforms of 10 years ago, the industry moves on. And we need to keep an eye on both those aspects. So I hope that this issue gets focused on in the Global Digital Compact consultations in a separate discussion. That'll be important. On this aspect of cybersecurity and trust, because these consumer devices, whether it's baby cams or several other applications that IoTs entail, I think we have an ongoing work stream from the roadmap on digital cooperation. It's called Digital Trust and Security. And my focus is on two aspects. One is building capacity, cybersecurity capacity, in the context of the SDGs. So we have a shortage of 6 to 7 million cybersecurity professionals around the world. And increasingly, Global South is leaking 6 to 7% of the GDP to cybercrime, cyber scams, etc. So we need to ramp up that capacity very, very quickly. The other is the trust side of the equation. So here, working with the industry, we need more labeling schemes that are aligned across the globe. Singapore is doing its own labeling scheme. NIST in the US is coming up with something on its own. UK has some very impressive work out there. including products relevant to children, but how do we make sure that others also learn from these experiences? So putting these things together in the international context with the UN as an enabler, that would be important. And this aspect of youth, the IGF, I was there in Addis, is very impressive. And last week at our consultations on the GDC, it was so impressive to see the very large number of youth that participated, school children, university children, young advocates. And I like to keep that up. And therefore, in the chat, I'm going to put a link to the consultation. So I encourage this community to participate and make its voice heard. The IDPs, refugees issues, working with our colleagues at the High Commissioner for Refugees, we've honed in on 2-3 issues that are important, that should find reflection in the global digital compact. We have a dilemma because the first thing that a person who crosses a border or is internally displaced and is no longer in familiar, comfortable surroundings, these days is asked for as a chip for a phone to be able to connect with loved ones, etc. And then you have the logistics of how do you get aid across if you don't know who you are getting it to and whether this person is eligible or not. There are all these compliance issues. So there's no escaping the use of digital and data. But again, there is a high bar within the UN for this, and we've come up with internal strategies. And I think our problem is that, the jurisdictions where these people are placed sometimes may have regulations which are not kind of, they may be aligned, but they may be difficult to work with. So we need to figure that out as we have this problem grow in complexity. The ICRC, other humanitarian colleagues are already discovering this problem. There is the cybersecurity aspect. There is a protection aspect. So you don't want people to hack into those lists. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So over to you, Carly, for some final thoughts on those questions.
Thanks, Jenna. So I think the first question was about this kind of race to the bottom question, or what happens when technologies emerge from jurisdictions without very strong legal frameworks. And I think what we can say is that the steps taken by jurisdictions which do have strong legal systems, the rule of law and human rights frameworks to regulate technology have shown us the kind of the highest common denominator impact that good regulation can have. And I'm specifically thinking about the kind of Brussels effect of legislation like the GDPR, wherein you had a very relatively strong legal framework imposed in a jurisdiction. And what we've seen as a result, given the kind of interdependencies of a globalized world when it comes to data and digital, that many companies are choosing to apply those same high standards around the world rather than have differentiated products in different markets. And equally that other countries are following Europe's example in order to align and harmonize with that higher level of protection. And so I think that the role of certain economies, particularly stronger economies, in setting the highest common denominator for technology, data and digital has really been evidenced through the European example. And I would hope that that could be replicated elsewhere. And particularly while lots of tech development is coming out of those countries, that is surely going to change, of course, as we see more and more kind of emerging economies building strong tech industries. And I think there the onus is on policymakers, activists, civil society activists to kind of push for alignment with those higher standards. And I really, I suppose, kind of lean into the benefits of global harmonization for the technology sector itself, which I think has played out in recent years around data regulation. On the second question around digital public infrastructure, I guess in contrast to my first answer, I would say that there's most of infrastructure is not about laws and regulation, but is in fact about the infrastructural challenges itself. And I think building better digital public infrastructure really does require addressing some of those much more technical, logistical infrastructure problems that stand as barriers to better use of data. We, at the Ada Lovelace Institute, we did a small piece of research around the COVID pandemic, interviewing people in research in the medical sector here in the UK, in policy, to ask them what were the barriers to better data sharing during COVID in the UK. And what we heard for the most part was not that law stood in the way or enabled or obstructed better data sharing, but rather very simple, often basic things like interoperability of data sets, lack of standardization of data semantics, lack of skills in different organizations, people who are empowered and educated in data issues, lack of relationships across organizations to enable data sharing, kind of very basic things. So I think the key to building better digital public infrastructure would be addressing some of those perhaps more banal things, not just high level policy or regulation, but actually the kind of nuts and bolts of infrastructure first, before we, in order to start to kind of build from the ground up towards those things. I would say though that on the regulation front, I think we could be doing a better job of mandating government access to certain private sector data sets to enable better data sharing, better interoperability of data. And there's clearly lots of gaps, lots of challenges there as well, and particularly with reference to that first question about countries, less rights respecting countries and the potential risks of that. So that's something that probably needs to further discussion.
Thank you so much, Carly and Amandeep. This has really been a great way to start off this discussion to really flesh out the issues. For anyone who put questions into the chat a bit later, I'm not going to be able to get to them. We're going to shift over to breakout rooms because we want to hear from all of you. I just want to draw your attention to the link that Amandeep put into the chat, which is where you can register for the consultation that's being led by the co-facilitators, Rwanda and Sweden. And noting that the call for written inputs is open till the end of March. So as Daniel and Yazid said, we will be compiling today's discussion as an input, but we encourage you all as individuals or on behalf of your organization to submit your own inputs as well, so that the issues that are really near and dear to you and the questions that are important to you really get heard through this consultation. So that will be really exciting. So back to you, Daniel, to take us through to the next part of the discussion. And thanks again to both of you.
Thank you, Jenna, Carly, and Amandeep. This was a really interesting conversation. And I think if we have to highlight something, is that this is a huge opportunity to influence policy at a global scale. This is something that we can't do every day, and we have to take that opportunity. I loved that Carly spoke about reclaiming control of data, of our data and all data. And this is very linked to agency, as Amandeep mentioned. I also loved especially the fact that we are focusing on preventing internet fragmentation, which is very deeply linked with having or defending an open and diverse web, which is very linked as well to digital rights, to interoperability, and in the last sense to the digital commons, as Amandeep mentioned. And finally, I want to highlight what Carly said at the end. The only legitimate way to do this is through a genuine, broad, global public conversation. We can't leave this in the hands of technologists or Silicon Valley. This is way too important to do that. We are now going to spend around 20 minutes or so to hear from all of you and discuss this topic of data, digital transformation, and the UN Global Digital Compact more openly. We are going to split into 4 or 5 smaller groups to help make a more open space for you to share in. Each room will have a different focus to correspond to the themes outlined in the call for submissions. Breakout group 1 will focus on data protection, 2 on applying human rights online, and 3 on promoting regulation of artificial intelligence. We're missing more details on 4 and 5. Sorry about that. This was a last-minute adjustment. And we will have slides up with some questions. Each room will have a moderator to keep time and note-take in the shared Google Doc added into the chat by Fadumo. If you have any question, please let us know. Fadumo is adding right now the document so you can get into the Google dug through the link, and you should be invited to join a group right now. Enjoy your conversations. Okay, everyone's back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had great conversations. The discussion in our room was very interactive and collaborative, so we are happy to be at this point. While you are sharing there, we would love to hear more about what you all discussed in the breakout sessions. What question did you find most interesting? Did you hear something that made you think differently, or do you have any questions that you think are important to raise? So please raise your hand on Zoom and I will come to you so we can hear directly from you.
Maybe the group number one could maybe like give like a short report on what we kind of discussed.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So our group number one was on data protection. So basically, we want to ask what might be the core data values principle when it comes to data protection, and what are the actions that we could take to bring about these like kind of changes. We didn't have like time to like delve that much into the second part, but we did talk briefly about what are the core data values principles. And it seems that like there's been a lot of discussion on, for example, what might be the acceptable data to be collected. And after those data are collected, what are the adequate terms to make sure that those collected are misused or have any kind of biases, and to make sure that those kind of data being collected in the first place has an adequate representation. So maybe in three parts. The first is like in the collecting stage, you have to make sure that data is representative of its use case, and that it might not be subject to any biases. The second part is that when the data is being, for example, used, you have to make sure the data would not be used for some other purpose, or that the original user did not intend it to be. And third, the data protection must also come with like rigorous security, cybersecurity guidelines to make sure that it has the expectation of privacy it deserves. And it comes to like key actions and commitments. One of them is to make sure that organizations share those data values, so that even if it is in the economic interest just to like collect as much data as possible, there are value-based approach instead of maybe like a more hardline regulatory approach might prompt them to actually prevent them from collecting that much data without need for like further regulation. The second part of key action is the standards and regulatory standards that already exist in some sort of security, cybersecurity space. So those are the thoughts that we talked about.
Thank you very much, June. We have time for one more shareback from groups. Anybody else who's willing to do it, who really needs to share the amazing conversation they had?
I can summarize discussion in group 2 because unfortunately we're cut short due to time, but like the floor was amazing and the discussion could have been on for a couple of hours more, I think. I think like there were like a couple of very interesting points that were raised in the beginning of how like it's not just a matter of understanding where the data goes, but it's a matter of like ensuring like accessibility and data literacy, because we have a lot of people, especially vulnerable people, that do not have an understanding of what they're signing off when they're signing off data. And we also talked about infrastructure, because right now, like, if you want to ensure that like there is actually like any trace of who has access to your data, you need to have proper infrastructure to record that. And then we talked about also how like private companies should not be the ones to be in charge of that, and there should be like a more like cooperative actions from governments, and it's also like a matter of trust and accountability in that. And finally, we move the discussion on how to ensure that when we talk about this, we include all parts of society, including as well, of course, people that sometimes are not represented in data. And I'm just not just talking about women, but I'm talking about non-binary people, undocumented refugees, transgender people. So we talk about like a lot of the discussion was like extremely animated. And, I invite everyone to keep connected and also to connect with each other on LinkedIn as much as you can, because I think it's like there is a lot of ground for discussion. It's always extremely interesting to see how different countries are tackling the issue and also tackling the discussion from different point of views.
Thank you, Benedetta. We will now go back to Yazid, who will tell us a little about the campaign dates and opportunities.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you everyone for that insightful and thought-provoking conversation. I must say I'm really fascinated by how much interested people are making valuable contribution. I was in the breakout room Martina was facilitating, and it's just really amazing to get to listen to the brilliant ideas people were sharing. And we also have Victor from Ghana, who works with an agency in charge of data, I think, share some of the best practices, and it's interesting to see how they are using some really best practices in ensuring that people's data is protected and using the experience of expertise in places where they are lacking, which I think is very important. And now that everyone has shared their ideas, as a next step to our team, we will summarize this insight and use them to submit the data value for Dumo, Farah, and Kate. And also, just like I said earlier, I would encourage you, if this is something you're interested in, please, you or your organization, draft something also to submit. The link was put on the group earlier on. Also, as my colleague Daniel mentioned earlier, we encourage everyone to submit their own individual organizational input to the consultation if you're interested in doing so. The deadline to submit is March 31st, 2023. My colleague Fadumo has added the link to the Global Compact website, where you can find more details and submission instruction. Finally, if you're interested in engaging more broadly in consultation on the Global Digital Compact, you can attend an upcoming session led by the Office of Tent. This consultation will be we have added registration link all yesterday. Please do register to attend. Now, what are our upcoming campaign moments? Before we close to this session, we also wanted to share some exciting campaign moments and engagement opportunities for everyone joining today. And if it's something that interests you, please just leverage on them. The next day, Data Value Community meeting will take place in early April. The meeting, please reach out to Fadumo. We encourage all of you on the call today to engage more and share your experiences, knowledge, and actionable insight through these meetings. United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific State Start-CAFE. In March, we will co-host a Start-CAFE with the Economic and Social Commission for Asia, and we can better push this agenda further in the region. We'll send out more details in the Data Value Campaign monthly newsletter, so please keep look out at this opportunity when they avail themselves. Ninth set, the next one is the
Sorry, something.
The 9th set, March 2023. Daniel, are you saying something?
No, sorry, we had an open mic there from someone else's conversation. And Yazid, you are cutting off a bit. Would you like me to take over?
Oh, sure. If I'm cutting off, please do.
Sorry.
Over.
So
Sure,
we
no
also have the 9th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. This will be taking place on February 28th to March the 2nd, 2023. And we are hosting a side session around data values. If you or your organization plans on attending, please reach out to Kate Richards at katerichards@data4sdgs.org for an opportunity to collaborate. Revamped social media toolkit for the campaign. In the coming weeks, we will share a new social media toolkit to help amplify our collective efforts in driving the campaign and manifesto forward. Share your ideas, comments, and more. We really encourage you to reach out if you would like to co-author a blog, submit communications to be featured via the Data Values channels. Sorry, we still have an open mic over there. And to share your creative ideas on how we can push and grow the campaign forward. Yazid, maybe you want to take over for the farewell?
Oh, sure, but before I do that, please confirm if you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Just so we don't. Oh, thank you so much, Daniel, for jumping in. I appreciate that. My network is a bit bad. And this has been really exciting, and we hope you all engage further. We hope you enjoy today's session. And before then, community campaign opportunities. Finally, if you're new to the campaign or would like to engage further, here are 10 easy ways for you to engage now. Open up the conversation. Share your ideas with us and the world by writing a piece in the Data Values Digest, for example. Get creative with comms by hosting fireside chat, create photo essay, or contribute to a podcast. Reflect internally by exploring the data values agenda and what it means for yours and your colleague. Walk through an internal workshop. Connect with your community by helping others to understand how data impacts their lives and what change we need by hosting a community workshop. Bringing people together by raising broader awareness by hosting side events at major convenings or speaking about data values at other events. Meet decision makers and encourage them to act on the data values manifesto through one-on-one meetings. Build coalitions by collaborating with existing networks or collaborate with other already engaged on data values by checking out the campaign bulletin board. Pass on your learnings by sharing your materials with others in the campaign so they can promote and inspire others to take action by documenting what you're doing and then share your approaches and learning. Grow the movement by sharing your work and learnings with others by attending the bi-monthly data values community meetings and encourage others to join the campaign by signing up to the mailing list. These are just a few ways to engage, and please get engaged. Please get in touch with us if you have ambitions, ideas, and need some support. This has really been exciting, and we hope that you all engage further. We hope you enjoyed today's session and are leaving feeling action-oriented. We hope you have a great rest of your day and week. Thank you for joining, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be a co-moderator for this session today.